Sometimes the heaviest fines aren't paid in dollars, they're paid in dignity. The sun hung low over Route 47, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt like prison bars. It was the kind of evening that felt too quiet, too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Rosa Martinez gripped the steering wheel of her 15-year-old Honda Civic, her knuckles pale against the worn leather. The check engine light had been on for 3 months. The passenger window wouldn't roll up all the way. The air conditioning had given up 2 summers ago, but it ran, and that was enough. She was coming home from her second shift, 12 hours at St. Michael's Memorial Hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant. Her scrubs still smelled faintly of disinfectant and exhaustion. Her feet ached. Her back throbbed. But her heart was light because tonight she'd helped a young mother deliver her first child. She'd held the woman's hand through every contraction, whispered every encouragement, and watched new life enter the world. That memory still glowed warm in her chest as she pressed the brake at the yellow light. Then she saw them. Red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror like fireworks, sudden and blinding. Her heart lurched. She looked down at her speedometer, 32 in a 35 zone. She'd stopped at the yellow. Her seatbelt was fastened. Her registration was current, barely, paid in installments over 3 months. Rosa's hands began to tremble. She pulled over slowly, carefully, onto the gravel shoulder. Dust rose around her tires like smoke. She turned off the engine, placed both hands on the wheel where they could be seen, and waited. The officer took his time. Through the side mirror, she watched him approach, tall, broad-shouldered, sunglasses reflecting the dying light. His uniform was crisp. His boots crunched the gravel with authority. His hand rested casually on his belt, near his radio, near his gun. Rosa's throat went dry. She'd done this before, not because she broke the law, but because she looked like someone people assumed did. Brown skin, old car, scrubs that might look like pajamas to someone who didn't know what a 12-hour shift felt like. The officer tapped her window with 2 fingers. She rolled it down manually, cranking the handle in slow, awkward circles. "License and registration," he said. "No greeting, no explanation." "Yes, sir." Her voice was soft, respectful, steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. She reached slowly for the glove compartment, narrating every movement. "I'm just reaching for my registration, sir. It's right here in the glove box." The officer said nothing, he just watched. Her fingers fumbled through old napkins, a broken pen, a rosary her mother had given her years ago. Finally, she found the paper, wrinkled, coffee-stained, but valid. She handed it to him along with her driver's license. He studied them for a long moment, too long. "Do you know why I pulled you over, ma'am?" Rosa's mind raced. The yellow light, but she'd stopped. Her speed, she'd been under the limit. Her tail light, it had been working this morning. "No, sir," she said honestly, "I don't." The officer removed his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, unreadable. "You failed to signal when you changed lanes 2 miles back." Rosa blinked. 2 miles back. She tried to remember. She'd moved over to let a truck pass. She'd checked her mirror. She'd been careful. Had she forgotten the signal? Maybe. She'd been tired. She'd been thinking about the mother, the baby, the way life keeps happening even when you're exhausted. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quietly. "I didn't realize." He nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing more. "Wait here." He walked back to his patrol car, and Rosa sat in the growing darkness, her hands still trembling, her heart beating too fast. She prayed, not for herself, but that whatever was about to happen, she'd have the strength to bear it. She didn't know yet that the price of that forgotten signal would be $5,000. She didn't know yet that this moment would change everything. Rosa had learned long ago that life didn't give you what you deserved. It gave you what it gave you, and you made peace with it or you drowned. She was 43 years old, a widow, and the mother of 2 teenage sons. Her husband, Mateo, had died 4 years ago from a heart attack, sudden, cruel, unfair. One morning he'd kissed her goodbye, and by evening he was gone. The hospital bills had buried them. The funeral costs had finished the job. She'd sold their small house and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side, where the rent was cheap and the sirens were frequent. But she'd survived. She worked 2 jobs, nursing assistant at the hospital during the day and 3 nights a week cleaning office buildings downtown. She slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. She drank too much coffee. She prayed too little, but her boys were fed. They were clothed. They were loved. Miguel, her eldest, was 17. He was quiet, serious, brilliant. He'd been accepted to State University with a partial scholarship. She was so proud of him it hurt. But the partial scholarship still left $8,000 a year. She'd been saving, slowly. $5 here, $10 there. She had almost $2,000 saved. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Her younger son, Danny, was 15. He was all fire and heart, the kind of boy who cried at movies and laughed too loud and asked questions that had no answers. He wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to help people. He was so much like his father it made her chest ache. She lived for them. Every ache, every exhausted mile, every double shift, it was all for them. And tonight, driving home with her body screaming for rest, she'd been thinking about Miguel's tuition, about Danny's shoes the soles were wearing thin, about the electric bill that was due in 3 days. She hadn't been thinking about turn signals. Now, sitting in the dark, waiting for the officer to return, she felt the weight of it all pressing down on her like water. She was so tired, tired in her bones, tired in her soul. The officer's boots crunched on the gravel again. She straightened in her seat, forcing her spine to hold her up. He leaned down, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Ma'am, I'm issuing you a citation for failure to signal a lane change." Rosa nodded. "I understand, sir. How much is the fine?" He paused, and in that pause something shifted. Something cold moved behind his eyes. $5,000. The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air like smoke, shapeless, impossible. Rosa stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" $5,000, due within 30 days. Her heart stopped, her breath caught, the world tilted. "Sir, I don't understand for a turn signal." His expression didn't change. "You were also driving with expired insurance." "No," she said quickly, her voice rising despite herself. "No, sir, my insurance is current. I have the card." "The card you showed me expired last month." Rosa's hands shook as she reached for her purse. She pulled out her insurance card, the one she'd printed 2 weeks ago after renewing online. She handed it to him. He barely glanced at it. "This isn't valid. You'll need to contact your provider. Until then, the citation stands. $5,000, 30 days. He handed her a ticket, turned, and walked away. Rosa sat frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. $5,000. The number echoed in her mind like a scream. That was Miguel's tuition. That was 6 months of rent. That was every dollar she'd saved and more. That was impossible. She looked down at the ticket, at the officer's signature scrawled across the bottom, at the word mandatory stamped in red. And for the first time in 4 years, since the morning Mateo didn't come home, Rosa Martinez began to cry. The patrol car's taillights disappeared around the bend, leaving Rosa alone on the side of the road. The evening had turned to night. The stars were out, cold and distant. She sat in the silence, her tears falling onto the ticket in her lap, smudging the ink. $5,000. She read it again, and again, as if reading it enough times would change it. Citation number 4729B. Violation: failure to signal / expired insurance. Fine $5,000. Payment due 30 days. Her mind raced. This couldn't be real. A turn signal violation was $50, maybe $75. Even with expired insurance, which hers wasn't, the total shouldn't exceed a few hundred. $5,000 was deliberate. It was punishment. It was cruelty dressed up as law. Rosa's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. She Googled traffic fine $5,000. The results talked about DUIs, reckless endangerment, hit and runs, not forgotten turn signals. She called her insurance company. The automated message said they were closed. She'd have to wait until morning. She sat there, engine off in the dark. A semi-truck roared past, shaking her car, then another, then silence again. She thought about Miguel, about the acceptance letter pinned to their refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, about the way his eyes had lit up when he'd read it aloud, his voice cracking with hope. She thought about Danny, about how he'd asked her last week if they could go to the movies just once like they used to before Dad died. She'd said maybe. She'd meant no. There was no money for maybe. She thought about Mateo, about how he used to tell her, "Rosa, you're the strongest person I know. You could carry the world if you had to." But she didn't want to carry the world. She just wanted to make it to tomorrow. Rosa wiped her face, started the car and drove home. The apartment was dark when she arrived. Miguel was at his night job at the grocery store. Danny was asleep, his homework still spread across the kitchen table. She stood in the doorway of his room, watching him breathe, his face soft and peaceful in the glow of the streetlight outside. She didn't wake him. She went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea she didn't drink, and sat at the table with the ticket in front of her. $5,000. She did the math. Her rent was $800 a month, utilities were $150, groceries were $300 if she was careful, Miguel's school expenses, Danny's shoes, the car insurance, the phone bill, the credit card minimum payments from Mateo's medical bills. There was nothing left, not even close. If she paid this fine, they'd lose the apartment. If she didn't pay, she'd lose her license. Without a license, she'd lose both jobs. Without her jobs, they'd lose everything. The trap was perfect. Rosa rested her head in her hands and prayed, not for a miracle. She'd stopped believing in those. She prayed for strength, for clarity, for the ability to carry one more impossible thing. At midnight, Miguel came home. He found her still sitting at the table. "Mom," his voice was soft with concern. "You okay?" She looked up, forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mijo, just tired." He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't push. "Get some sleep, Mom. You've got another shift tomorrow." She nodded. "You too, baby." He kissed the top of her head and went to his room. Rosa sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the ticket, and wondered how much a person could bend before they broke. The next morning, she called the police station. The woman who answered sounded bored. "Traffic citations." "Yes, hello, my name is Rosa Martinez. I received a citation yesterday and I believe there's been a mistake. The fine is..." "Citation number." Rosa read it off. The sound of typing, a long pause. "That's correct. $5,000, failure to signal and expired insurance." "But my insurance isn't expired," Rosa said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "I renewed it. I have proof." "Then you'll need to contest it in court. Court date is on the ticket. You can also pay online or by mail." "Ma'am, I can't afford $5,000. Is there?" "You can request a payment plan at your court appearance. Anything else?" Rosa's throat tightened. "No, thank you." She hung up. The court date was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of not knowing. 3 weeks of carrying this weight. 3 weeks of watching her sons and wondering if she'd have to tell them they were losing everything. She went to work. She smiled at patients. She changed bedpans. She held hands. She pretended she wasn't falling apart. At lunch, she sat in her car and cried. And then she went back inside and kept going. because that's what Rosa Martinez did. She kept going. The days blurred together like water, each one heavier than the last. Rosa couldn't eat. Sleep came in fragments, broken by nightmares of eviction notices and empty refrigerators. She'd wake at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, and do the math again. Always the same, always impossible. She told no one. Not her sister, who lived 2 states away and had her own struggles. Not her boys, who looked at her with such trust it made her want to scream. Not her coworkers, who already whispered about how tired she looked. She carried it alone, the way she'd carried everything since Mateo died. At work she moved through the motions, she checked vitals, she comforted patients, she laughed at jokes she didn't hear. Inside she was drowning. One afternoon, she was changing the sheets for Mr. Thompson, an elderly man recovering from hip surgery. He watched her with kind eyes. "You doing all right, Rosa?" She smiled automatically. "I'm fine, Mr. Thompson, just a little tired." "You're always tired," he said gently, "but today you look like you're carrying the world." Her hand stilled on the blanket. For a moment she almost told him, almost let the words spill out. "I got a ticket, $5,000, I don't know what to do, I'm so scared," but she swallowed them down. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Really." He reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're a good woman, Rosa. Whatever you're facing, you'll get through it. You're stronger than you know." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and finished making his bed. At home, she became a ghost. Miguel noticed first. "Mom, you're not eating." "I ate at work," she lied. "You're losing weight." "I'm fine, Mijo." Danny tried to cheer her up. He showed her his English paper and A-. He told her jokes. He hugged her randomly, the way he used to when he was little. She hugged him back and felt like she was breaking. One night, she sat at the kitchen table with her bills spread in front of her. She'd been staring at them for an hour, trying to find money that didn't exist, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that would never fit. Miguel came out of his room. He stood in the doorway watching her. "Mom." She looked up. "What's wrong?" The words sat on her tongue, heavy and bitter. "I got a ticket, $5,000, we're going to lose everything." But she couldn't say them, couldn't put that weight on his shoulders. He was 17. He should be thinking about college, about his future, not about how to survive. "Nothing, baby, just organizing." He walked over, looked at the papers, at the overdue notices, at the ticket sitting beneath her hand. His face went pale. "Mom, $5,000. Her chest tightened. "It's a mistake, I'm handling it." "For a traffic stop." "Miguel." "This isn't right." His voice rose, anger flashing in his eyes, rare for him, startling. "This isn't legal, they can't." "Miguel," she stood, took his hands. "I'm handling it, I have a court date, I'll explain everything, it'll be okay." He stared at her and she watched him do the math, the same math she'd been doing, the math that didn't work. "You can't pay this," he said quietly. "I'll figure it out." "How?" She didn't have an answer. Miguel pulled away, ran his hands through his hair. "I'll take a gap year, I'll work full-time, we'll." "No." "Mom." "No," her voice was steel. "You're going to college, that's not negotiable." "Not if we're homeless." The word hung between them like a knife. Rosa felt something crack inside her. She'd worked so hard to protect them from this, from fear, from poverty, from the feeling that the world was crushing you and there was nowhere to hide. She'd failed. "We're not going to be homeless," she said, but her voice shook. Miguel looked at her with eyes too old for 17. "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. You can't protect me from this." She wanted to argue, to send him to his room like she did when he was little, to fix this before he had to know how broken it was. But he was right. He wasn't a kid anymore. And she couldn't protect him from the truth. She sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Miguel knelt beside her. "We'll figure it out together." She looked at her son, her beautiful, brilliant son, and felt both pride and heartbreak. Together, she agreed. But inside she knew the truth. There was nothing to figure out. The system had decided, and people like her didn't win against the system. They just survived it. If they were lucky. The court date arrived too quickly and too slowly, all at once. Rosa woke at dawn, dressed in her only professional outfit, a black skirt and white blouse she'd bought for Mateo's funeral and hadn't worn since. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to see herself the way a judge would. Respectable, honest, worthy of mercy. She saw a tired woman with shadows under her eyes and fear in her bones. Miguel insisted on coming with her. She tried to argue, but he'd already asked for the morning off work. Danny wanted to come too, but she'd made him go to school. Someone had to pretend life was normal. They drove to the courthouse in silence. The building was gray concrete and cold authority. Security guards, metal detectors, marble floors that echoed every footstep. Rosa felt small walking through those doors, like she was being swallowed by something too big to fight. They found the right courtroom, took seats on a wooden bench, waited. Around them others waited too. A young man in a too big suit, an elderly woman clutching a cane, a mother with two small children who wouldn't sit still. All of them looked the same way Rosa felt, afraid, powerless, hopping for mercy from a system that dealt in fines and judgments, not compassion. "Martinez," a bailiff called. Rosa stood. Her legs felt weak. Miguel squeezed her hand. "You've got this, Mom." She walked to the defendant's table, her heart hammering. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked at Rosa over reading glasses. "Ms. Martinez, you're here to contest a citation. $5,000 for failure to signal an expired insurance." "Yes, Your Honor." "How do you plead?" Rosa's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "Not guilty, Your Honor. I renewed my insurance before the stop. I have documentation." The judge looked at the officer's report. The officer noted that the insurance card you provided was expired. "I had printed a new one that day, Your Honor, but I didn't have it with me. My insurance was active. I can provide proof from the company." The judge studied the report for a long moment. "And the failure to signal?" Rosa hesitated. "Your Honor, I may have forgotten to signal. I don't remember clearly. I was tired. But I don't believe that warrants a $5,000 fine." The judge's expression didn't change. "The fine is set by statute for combined violations including insurance lapse." "But my insurance wasn't lapsed." Silence. The judge looked at Rosa, really looked at her. At her worn clothes, at her tired eyes, at the trembling in her hands she couldn't hide. "Ms. Martinez, did you bring documentation of your insurance renewal?" "Yes, Your Honor." Rosa pulled the papers from her purse with shaking hands and gave them to the bailiff, who handed them to the judge. The judge examined them. Each second felt like an hour. Finally, she looked up. "Your insurance was active. The officer was incorrect." Relief flooded through Rosa so powerfully she almost collapsed. "The insurance charge is dismissed." "Thank you, Your Honor, thank you." "However," the judge continued, her voice firm, "the failure to signal violation stands. The fine is $250. $250, not $5,000. Rosa wanted to cry with relief. $250 she could manage. She could ask for overtime. She could skip groceries for a week. She could do it. "Do you accept this judgment?" "Yes, Your Honor, yes, thank you." The judge nodded. "You have 30 days to pay." Dismissed. Rosa walked out of that courtroom feeling like she could breathe again, like the weight that had been crushing her for 3 weeks had suddenly lifted. Miguel hugged her in the hallway. "Mom, you did it." She held him tight, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, we're okay." They walked toward the exit, and that's when Rosa saw him. The officer, Officer Blake, according to his name tag. He was standing by the door, waiting. Their eyes met, and Rosa felt the relief drain away, replaced by something colder. He'd lied. He'd written expired insurance on that report knowing it wasn't true. He tried to bury her under a fine she couldn't pay. Why? He didn't look away, didn't look ashamed. Rosa walked toward him, her heart pounding with something new, not fear this time, but anger. "Excuse me, Officer Blake." He turned. "Ma'am." "Why did you lie?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't lie, I reported what I saw. My insurance was valid, you know that now." He said nothing. "Do you know what you almost did to me, to my family?" Still nothing. Rosa stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. "I work 2 jobs, I have 2 sons. I've been saving for 3 years to send my oldest to college. That fine would have destroyed us. Do you understand that? Destroyed us." Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort, maybe shame. "I was doing my job," he said quietly. "Your job is to protect people, not punish them for being poor." The words hung in the air between them. Officer Blake looked away first. Rosa didn't wait for a response. She walked past him, out into the sunlight where Miguel was waiting. But as she walked away, she heard Officer Blake's voice, barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." She didn't turn around. But she heard it. And something in those 2 words felt real. Rosa thought that would be the end of it. She paid the $250. She went back to work. She tried to forget the way Officer Blake had looked at her in the courthouse, like he'd seen something in her that made him uncomfortable with himself. But 3 days later, he showed up at the hospital. Rosa was restocking supplies in the 4th-floor storage room when someone cleared their throat behind her. She turned. Officer Blake stood in the doorway out of uniform, jeans, a plain blue shirt. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. Rosa froze. "Ms. Martinez," he said quietly, "I'm sorry to bother you at work. I asked at the front desk. They said I could find you here." She didn't speak, just waited. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize properly." Rosa set down the bandages she'd been holding. "You already did." "Not really, not the way you deserve." Silence stretched between them. Finally Rosa spoke. "Why did you do it?" He exhaled slowly as if he'd been waiting for that question. "I told myself I was doing my job. I saw an old car, expired tags on the plate cover. I later realized that was just dirt, not expiration, and I assumed." He stopped. "I assumed a lot of things, none of them fair." "You assumed I was breaking the law because of how I looked." He met her eyes. "Yes." The honesty of it startled her. "And when I wrote the report," he continued, "I was angry at you for making me feel like I'd been unfair, so I made it worse. I wrote expired insurance even though I wasn't sure. I thought—" He trailed off. "You thought I wouldn't fight it," Rosa finished. "You thought I'd just pay." "Yes." Rosa felt the anger rising again. "Do you know how many people don't fight? How many people see $5,000 and just give up? How many lose their cars, their jobs, their homes, because someone like you decided they deserved it?" "I know," his voice was rough. "I know now." "Now," Rosa repeated, "after you almost destroyed my life." "I'm sorry," his voice broke on the words. "I am so, so sorry." Rosa looked at him, really looked. She saw something she hadn't expected to see. Shame, real, devastating shame. She thought about that moment in the courthouse, about the way he'd whispered those 2 words, about how he'd come here to her workplace to face her again. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to know, and because," he hesitated, "because I have a daughter." Rosa waited. She's 19, she's in college, she's brilliant and kind and—" He swallowed hard. "After the court hearing, I kept thinking about your son sitting there, about what you said, and I realized, if someone treated my daughter the way I treated you, I'd want to destroy them." He looked at her, his eyes wet. "I became a cop to help people. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I started seeing everyone as a threat or a problem. I stopped seeing people." He paused. "You reminded me, and I'm sorry it took almost destroying your life for me to remember." Rosa felt something shift in her chest. The anger was still there, but beside it something else. Understanding, not forgiveness yet, but understanding. "What do you want from me?" she asked softly. "Nothing," he said immediately. "I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that what I did was wrong, that you were right, that I'm going to do better." Rosa studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised even her. "Have you eaten lunch?" He blinked. "What?" "It's almost noon. The cafeteria here is pretty good. Have you eaten?" "Eyes no." Rosa picked up her jacket. "Come on." They sat in the hospital cafeteria, across from each other, two strangers who'd been enemies 3 weeks ago. Rosa ate soup. "Officer Blake, call me David," he'd said quietly, picked at a sandwich. "Why are you being kind to me?" he asked finally. Rosa thought about it. About Mateo, who taught her that anger was heavy and forgiveness was freedom. About her sons, who watched how she moved through the world and learned from it. About the patient this morning who'd held her hand and said, "You're the kindest person I've ever met." "Because I'm tired of being angry," she said, "and because everyone deserves a second chance." David looked at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway." They ate in silence for a moment. Then David said, "My daughter's name is Emma. She wants to be a teacher." Rosa smiled. "My youngest wants to be a teacher too. Danny, he's 15. Miguel's the one going to college." "Yes, state university, partial scholarship." David nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the table. Rosa looked at it confused. "What is this?" "Open it." She did. Inside was a check, made out to Rosa Martinez, for $5,000. Her heart stopped. "I can't." "It's not charity," David said quickly. "It's restitution, for what I almost did, for what I should never have done." "David." "Please," his voice was urgent, almost pleading. "Let me do this one right thing. Let me help fix what I broke." Rosa stared at the check, her hands shaking. $5,000, Miguel's tuition, Danny's shoes, the breathing room she'd been desperate for. But it felt wrong, like accepting it would mean what happened was okay. "I can't take this," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because this is your family's money, your daughter's future." David's voice was soft. "Emma has what she needs. Your son should too." Tears filled Rosa's eyes. "You don't owe me this." "Yes," he said quietly, "I do." Rosa looked at this man, this stranger, who'd been cruel and was now trying to be kind. And she made a choice. "Half," she said. "What?" "I'll take half, 2,500, for Miguel's tuition. The other half," she looked at him steadily. "Give it to someone who needs it, someone you stop on the road, someone who looks like they're carrying the world. Help them the way you're helping me." David stared at her, then slowly he nodded. "Deal." David Blake drove home from the hospital in a daze. He'd expected anger. He'd expected her to throw him out, maybe even file a complaint. He'd expected her to hate him the way he deserved to be hated. He hadn't expected kindness. He hadn't expected forgiveness. And he certainly hadn't expected lunch. He parked in his driveway and sat there, engine off, staring at nothing. The check had been cashed, $2,500, half to Rosa for Miguel's tuition, half held back, waiting for the next person David stopped who needed it more than punishment. The money wasn't the point. The point was what Rosa had shown him. Grace. He'd spent 15 years as a cop. He'd started with ideals: protect and serve, help people, make a difference. But somewhere in the grind of quotas and paperwork and seeing the worst of humanity every day, those ideals had corroded. He'd started seeing everyone as suspect, every traffic stop as potential danger, every old car as probable cause. He'd forgotten that behind every license plate was a person, a life, a family, dreams and fears and struggles he knew nothing about. Rosa Martinez had reminded him. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with dignity. She'd looked at him, a man who tried to bury her under an unjust fine, and she'd offered him soup. David walked inside. His wife Jennifer was in the kitchen. "How'd it go?" she asked. He'd told her everything, about the stop, about the fine, about the guilt that had been eating him alive since the courthouse. "She forgave me," he said quietly. Jennifer turned surprised. "Really?" "More than that, she had lunch with me. She accepted half the money, and she told me to give the other half to someone else who needs it." Jennifer walked over, wrapped her arms around him. "She sounds remarkable." "She is." David's voice was thick. "Jen, I almost destroyed her life. I almost made her lose everything, and she forgave me." "What are you going to do now?" David thought about it, about the uniform in his closet, about the patrol car he'd drive tomorrow, about every stop he'd make, every person he'd encounter. "I'm going to remember," he said. "Every single time I pull someone over, I'm going to remember Rosa Martinez. I'm going to remember that they're human, that they have families, that I have power, and power without compassion is just cruelty." Jennifer kissed his cheek. "I'm proud of you." But David didn't feel proud. He felt humbled, small, like he'd been given a gift he hadn't earned and now had to spend the rest of his life living up to it. The next day, David went back to work. He pulled over a car for a broken tail light, a young mother with 2 kids in the back. The car was old, the tags close to expiring. Before he would have seen violation, risk, problem. Now he saw Rosa. He saw someone trying, someone probably stretched too thin, someone who didn't need a fine, who needed help. "Ma'am," he said gently, "your taillight's out, you know that." She nodded, eyes wide with fear. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it fixed. I don't have the money right now." David looked at her, really looked, saw the car seat held together with duct tape, the worn clothes, the exhaustion in her eyes. He thought about Rosa, about Grace. "I'm not going to ticket you," he said. Her eyes widened. "You're not?" "No, but you need to get that fixed. It's dangerous." He paused. "There's an auto shop on 5th Street, Mike's garage. Tell Mike that Officer Blake sent you. He'll fix it at cost." She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. Thank you so much." He nodded. "Drive safe." As he walked back to his car, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Over the next weeks, David changed. He gave warnings instead of tickets when people deserved them. He helped a stranded driver change a tire instead of citing them for blocking traffic. He stopped an elderly man for expired registration and drove him to the DMV himself to get it renewed. His partner noticed. "What's gotten into you, Blake?" David smiled. "I met someone who reminded me why I became a cop." Word spread. Other officers saw the change. Some mocked him, called him soft, said he wasn't doing his job. But some asked questions, wanted to know what had shifted. David told them about Rosa, about how she'd shown him grace when he deserved judgment, about how kindness was harder and braver than cruelty. Not everyone listened, but some did. And slowly, quietly, things began to change. One evening, 6 weeks after the court hearing, David was on patrol when he saw her. Rosa, walking out of the grocery store, carrying 2 bags heading toward her car. He pulled over, got out. "Ms. Martinez." She turned, startled, then relaxed when she saw him. "David, hi." "Hi," he gestured to the bags. "Can I help you with those?" She smiled. "I've got them, thank you." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. "I wanted you to know," David said. "I used the other 2,500. There was a kid, 19 years old, driving his grandfather's car to a job interview. Broken headlight. He was terrified he'd lose the opportunity if he got a ticket. I gave him the money to fix the car and get a suit for the interview." Rosa's eyes lit up. "David, that's wonderful. I wouldn't have done it without you." She shook her head. "You would have. You just needed to remember who you were." He smiled. "Maybe." Rosa shifted the bags in her arms. "How's Emma?" "Good, she's home for the weekend. She met someone, a boy in her psychology class. She's happy." "I'm glad. How's Miguel?" Rosa's face glowed with pride. "He starts next month. We got the final tuition sorted out. He's terrified and excited and," she laughed, "he's ready." "Because of you." "Because of a lot of people." She looked at him meaningfully, "including you." David felt his throat tighten. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." "Everyone deserves one." She paused. "Even cops who make mistakes." He laughed, surprising himself. "Even them." They said goodbye. David watched her drive away, her old Honda sputtering but running. And he felt something he'd been missing for years. Peace. 3 months later, Rosa received a letter in the mail. She opened it at the kitchen table while Danny did homework, and Miguel packed for his first semester of college. Inside was a handwritten note and a photograph. "Dear Rosa, I wanted you to see this. It's from a program I started at the department, Second Chance Traffic. Instead of fining people for minor violations, officers are trained to assess need and offer resources. Help with car repairs, connections to job programs, grace instead of punishment." The photo is from our first training session. 20 officers attended. We talked about power, compassion, and what it really means to protect and serve. I told them about you, about how you taught me more about being a good cop in one lunch than I'd learned in 15 years on the force. This program exists because you exist, because you chose kindness when you could have chosen anger, because you believed people can change. Thank you for saving my career, my conscience, and maybe my soul. With gratitude, David Blake. Rosa stared at the photo. 20 officers standing together, David in the front row, all of them looking hopeful. Tears filled her eyes. "Mom," Miguel looked over, "you okay?" She nodded, unable to speak, and handed him the letter. He read it, then he looked at his mother with wonder. "Mom, you changed the whole system." "I didn't change anything," she whispered. "I just had lunch with someone." "No," Miguel said firmly. "You showed him grace when he didn't deserve it. You taught him to be better, and now he's teaching other people. That's how the world changes, Mom, one person at a time." Rosa looked at her son, so wise, so good, and felt overwhelming gratitude. For this moment, for this life, for having survived long enough to see something good come from something painful. 2 weeks later, there was a ceremony at the police station. David had called her personally. "We're officially launching the program. I'd like you to be there, if you're comfortable." She hadn't been sure, but Miguel had convinced her. "Mom, you have to go. This is history." So she went. Miguel and Danny came with her. The station was full of people, officers, community members, local reporters. The mayor gave a speech about reform and compassion. The police chief talked about changing culture from within. Then David stepped up to the microphone. "This program wouldn't exist without Rosa Martinez," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "She's the woman I wronged, The woman who showed me that our job isn't just about enforcing laws, it's about serving people, about recognizing their humanity. He looked directly at Rosa. She taught me that kindness is stronger than authority, that forgiveness is braver than judgment, that one act of grace can change everything. The room erupted in applause. Rosa felt tears streaming down her face. Miguel held one hand, Danny held the other. After the ceremony, people came up to her, officers who wanted to thank her, community members who'd been helped by the new program. A young woman who said, "Officer Blake gave me money to fix my car last month. I thought he was crazy. Now I understand. He learned it from you." David approached last. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me." They stood there, two people who'd been strangers, then enemies, then something neither of them had expected. "Friends." "Rosa," David said, "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for everything." She took his hand. "I forgive you, David. I forgave you the day we had lunch." "Why?" His voice broke. "After what I did." "Because holding on to anger would have destroyed me, and because," she smiled, "because I believe people can change. You proved me right." David's eyes filled with tears. "I won't waste it. This second chance you gave me, I promise." "I know you won't." As Rosa and her sons drove home that evening, Danny said, "Mom, do you think Officer Blake will really stick with it? Or will he go back to being mean?" Rosa thought about it, about the look in David's eyes when he'd apologized, about the program he'd built, about the lives already being changed. "I think," she said slowly, "that once you see people as human, you can't unsee it. I think David learned something he won't forget." Miguel smiled. "You gave him something more valuable than forgiveness, Mom." "What's that?" "Hope. You showed him he could be better, that it wasn't too late." Rosa felt warmth spread through her chest. Maybe we all needed that reminder. They drove home through the quiet streets, the evening sky painted orange and pink. And Rosa thought about how strange life was, how a terrible moment could become a turning point, how pain could transform into purpose, how one act of grace could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. She thought about Mateo, about how he'd told her she could carry the world. She'd been carrying it, but maybe, finally, she didn't have to carry it alone. Maybe grace meant letting other people help, letting them change, letting forgiveness heal both the wounded and the one who caused the wound. Maybe that was the whole point. 6 months later, Rosa stood in the parking lot of State University, helping Miguel unload boxes from her car. The Honda had finally been replaced, not with anything fancy, but something reliable, something safe. David had connected her with a police auction where she'd gotten a good deal. "One last gift," he'd said. "Let me help." She'd let him. Miguel's dorm room was small but full of light. Danny helped carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, complaining dramatically, making them all laugh. When everything was unpacked, Rosa stood in the doorway looking at her son's new life. The textbooks on the desk, the posters on the walls. The future spread out before him like a map. "You did it, Mijo," she whispered. Miguel hugged her. "We did it, Mom, together. You're going to do amazing things. I learned from the best." Rosa held him tight, memorizing the moment. Then she let go, because that's what love was sometimes, holding on and knowing when to let go. As they drove home, Danny said, "Mom, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't fought the ticket? If you just given up?" Rosa thought about that night on the side of the road, crying over a fine that felt impossible, about the weight of it, the fear. "I think," she said, "that I would have survived. I always survive, but I would have lost something important." "What?" "Hope." She glanced at him. "Believing that things can get better, that people can change, that grace matters." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you think Officer Blake would have changed if you'd been angry at him?" Rosa considered it. Maybe, maybe not. But I know that anger would have changed me, made me harder, colder. I didn't want to become that person. So you forgave him for you. Partly, and partly because I wanted to believe in second chances, because someday I might need one too. That night Rosa sat on her small balcony, drinking tea, looking at the stars. She thought about the past year, about the traffic stop that had almost destroyed her, about the fine she'd fought, about the lunch that had changed everything. She thought about David, about the program he'd built, about the hundreds of people who'd been shown grace instead of punishment because one cop had learned to see humans instead of violations. She thought about Miguel, starting his first day of college tomorrow, about Danny, who wanted to be a teacher, about Mateo, who she still missed every day but could finally remember without drowning in grief. She thought about how life worked, how pain and grace were often intertwined, how the hardest moments could become the most meaningful. Her phone buzzed, a text from David. Just gave a warning to a single dad with 3 kids, broken taillight, helped him fix it on the side of the road. He cried, "Thank you for teaching me that this is what the badge is for." Rosa smiled and texted back, "Proud of you, keep going." She set down her phone and looked at the stars again. And she thought about a truth she'd learned the hard way. The world was full of people carrying impossible weights. The world was full of people who'd forgotten how to be kind. The world was full of brokenness and injustice and pain. But the world was also full of grace, of second chances, of people who chose forgiveness when anger would have been easier, of small acts of kindness that rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. You couldn't control what happened to you. You couldn't control who hurt you or how the system treated you or how much weight you'd have to carry. But you could control how you responded. You could choose bitterness or grace, anger or forgiveness, closing your heart or keeping it open. Rosa had chosen to keep her heart open. And that choice had changed everything. Not just for her, but for David, for the officers he trained, for the people they helped, for Miguel and Danny, who watched how their mother moved through the world and learned that strength wasn't about being hard. It was about being soft enough to bend without breaking, brave enough to forgive, wise enough to know that grace was the most powerful force in the universe. Rosa finished her tea, said a prayer for everyone carrying impossible weights tonight, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, new weights to carry. But tonight she was at peace, because she'd learned the secret that took a lifetime to understand. Kindness isn't weakness. Forgiveness isn't surrender. They're the hardest, bravest things a person can do. And sometimes, when you show grace to someone who doesn't deserve it, you don't just change their life. You change the whole world. One heart at a time.